Well, hello. It's that time of year, our favorite time of year. End of financial year's come and gone. And now we've got to get together our taxes for ourselves or our accountants. And so comes the time where this is the first financial year. We've actually got a determination on, well, at least a draft determination on how we can charge for our electricity costs for an EV. So now typically, of course, there's two different ways to claim your car expenses. Of course, you're only allowed charging for your business use, and I'll defer to the ATO's website for that because it's very good at explaining that. So there's typically two different ways, the cents per kilometer and the logbook. Cents per kilometer, you just manage to come up with a number that you can justify of how many kilometers were business for the year, and then just multiplying that by the number of cents per kilometer, which currently this financial year will be 85 cents per kilometer. Now that's supposed to encompass your costs for whether you call it fuel or electricity, insurance, rego, depreciation. That's supposed to take all of that into account. And so if you've got an EV, then most likely in the last 12 months you've purchased it new, which means depreciation actually is something worth thinking about, because obviously a new car comes with a lot of depreciation in the first number of years. So the cents per kilometer, you're not allowed claiming depreciation aside from that. So that's always something. And then in terms of using the logbook method, and I think that's what I'll mostly be discussing here, you can't obviously charge for your home electricity bill or a percentage of that unless you've got a separate meter for your car, which of course is an option that I haven't run across anyone except in apartment buildings that has done that. So what am I covering today? It's mostly that at-home charging determination, and what I'm not covering is what is work-related travel. I'm not covering any particular financial advice. I'm talking about my situation and how I've thought things through for my business use. And I'm not telling you how to file your tax return. I'm not giving you tax advice, or I'm not saying what's best for your circumstances, of course. So, and I'm also not talking about the FBT exemption and people who get their cars under business or fringe benefits or salary sacrifice. That sort of discussion I'm going to defer actually to a YouTube channel called 12 Accounting. It has really good videos on what is business use for your car, what's justifiable. They're accountants, of course, I'm not. And a rundown on FBT exemption. So if you haven't bought an EV yet, you have to watch their video on FBT exempt cars, for whether you're in a company structure or whether you work for health or a government organization where you can salary sacrifice and get that exemption. It's really a cost-effective strategy. So I can't emphasize enough, but it's not what I'm talking about today. I'll be covering this draft legislation from the ATO that is talking about our how we can be remunerated for home charging. Now, of course, they've said if you charge at superchargers, you can claim that back directly. But if you're also charging at home, then you're not allowed to claim for both the fast charging or the third-party charging fees and your home charging. You have to pick one or the other, and you sacrifice one or the other. So ideally, if you're rapid charging for your business or for your employer, then you can get them to directly reimburse you that, and hopefully you don't have to sacrifice all your home charging or all your rapid charging costs to use the other. So now, I gave you a quick rundown on the cents per kilometer. I just want to, that one, of course, you don't need to keep your receipts for. You just need a proof of how you demonstrated you came up with a number of how many kilometers a year you did for your vehicle for work. And that doesn't take into account depreciation, which I think in my circumstances, it's going to be like $12,000 for the first year for the Model Y in terms of my tax deductibility for just depreciation before all the other car expenses. So that's far more than the maximum 5,000 kilometers you can get under the cents per kilometer method, and timesing that by 85 cents, which will be 3 or 4 grand sort of thing. So for 4,000 something, 250. So that you're losing out on a bit by using that method. But of course, if you haven't kept a logbook, if you haven't kept receipts, you haven't done that sort of thing, then that's available to you. So under the logbook method, and just with the depreciation, remember you can only depreciate up to a maximum value of the car of $64,000. So if you bought Porsche Cayenne EV and you paid 240 grand, you can only really depreciate the 64-ish thousand dollars that they determine is your luxury car limit for billing depreciation. So expensive cars, probably, yeah, they're not letting you depreciate a $250,000 car, which I guess makes sense. Taxman can't give us too many breaks, but up to 64 grand, so the 70 something thousand dollar Model Y, you can just depreciate 64,800 or something like that. So coming to the logbook, you're supposed to keep 12 weeks out of the year, or because it's probably a new car, or you have to do it once every 5 years. I understand, and that is used. What percentage of work was that? And you generalize that to the rest of the year and the following years. So you need to keep receipts for this method, insurance, rego, repairs, interest on loans, that sort of thing. But remember, I'm not talking about leasing. That's separate. But we've got no receipts for home charging. So normally you'd keep your petrol receipts, you'd add them up, or you'd demonstrate an approximation. But home charging, they're not happy with the approximation. And so last year with my accountant, he wasn't really sure. ATO hadn't made a determination. So now they have. For the logbook method, is not cents per kilometer method. Even though I'm talking cents per kilometer, it's not the cents per kilometer method. For the logbook method, for home charging costs, they are offering 4.2 cents per kilometer for what you can claim as your electricity costs for running your car, your EV, not your plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. That's separate. And I'll put links to the ATO draft determination. Now remember, it's a draft, and it was open to public opinion there until a month, 6 weeks ago, and that closed. And sadly, I didn't get anything in time, because I think this has discovered here, particularly with increasing electricity prices, that 4.2 cents is a good chance many of you will not be getting adequately deducted for your charging costs, but we'll get there. So you don't have receipts for charging at home. You don't have a separate meter, most probably. And so it gets mixed up with everything else. They don't want us to rely on our car's data for how many kilowatts we've used, and that doesn't tell you whether you're during a peak tariff or overnight, or in Queensland on controlled load, or what the case may be. So I'm going to break down, because it's going to be different for every single person. Everyone's driving, and remember, this only counts for business kilometers. So we have a Tesla Model Y, and so I've kind of broken it down into high efficiency and low efficiency here. So I'm taking the liberty to say my car is very efficient at 100, and this is for the lifetime, for the last 8,000 kilometers, 155 watt hours per kilometer is how Tesla presents it. Other car makers, of course, present it differently, whether it's what is it? They use something different in North America, but anyways, here we'd get kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, whereas I am of the maybe unpopular opinion that per 100 kilometers, although we've used it for practicality in ICE cars, is a bit of a legacy unit, and it's not a unit, because 100 kilometers is a hectokilometer, which is not an order of magnitude. So I prefer to reduce things, perhaps, and I don't mind a watt hour per kilometer. But of course, regardless of how you judge it, for the purposes of our calculation, we are going to change that to kilowatt hours, and kilo being 1,000. So we take it back 3 decimal places, and we make 0.155 kilowatt hours per kilometer is what we're using, and that way my units all line up. So I've presented here with a high efficiency vehicle and a lower efficiency vehicle, which will be 0.2 kilowatt hours per kilometer. And we have electricity prices and the unlucky and lucky ones here. So we've got 20 cents per kilowatt hour as the cost, average charging cost for your EV. So this is different kind of use cases. And 40 cents, I just changed from AGL, which now the overnight tariff for most business uses, you'd be charging at night rather than during the day, during the shoulder period. So it was going up to, overnight was going to be 40 cents. I actually got 42 cents here. 41 cents is what it was going to be. 41 and 41 cents is what it was going to be. And I've done my maths for 41 cents, so that's why I changed that. But right now I've switched to OVO Energy, which has an overnight charging of 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which we're gonna see on August 1st what changes they make to their tariff pricing, because that might affect that. So I haven't put that video out yet on what plan I'm on at the minute. And so, just approximating, we've got my use case and the use case of a less efficient EV or less efficient right foot. Or more highway kilometers, for example, or whatever. But you can do better than this, and you can do worse than that. So, 20 cents per kilowatt hour overnight charging, and that will land you at 3.1 cents. I'm doing cents, not dollars here. 3.1 cents per kilometer. So that is less than the 4.2 cents per kilometer that the ATO is giving you. Whereas if you're paying 41 cents per kilowatt hour, you are at 6.4, which is clearly more. And in the less efficient EV, at 200 watt hours per kilometer, or 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, you'd be at 20 cents, then landing yourself at 4. And at the higher tariff, 8.2 cents per kilometer. So we see probably a less efficient EV with a better electricity price would probably run around that 4 cents per kilometer deduction, whereas you can do better, and you can certainly do worse, up to double if you're on a standard plan with better daytime use, for example, or lower supply charge, and I'll get to that in a second. But certainly the 4 cents for just energy. Remember, because you're in the logbook method, you are also claiming all your separate Red Joe and yada 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 yada. So that's all fine. This is just for energy, and so it probably gets around the mark for maybe average, but certainly not every use case. And I think they just have to make a generality, which I think needs to go up in a higher deduction. Why I think this is incomplete is because this efficiency is only on driving. This doesn't include a lot of other energy uses for a vehicle that, if it was an internal combustion engine vehicle, you would still be getting these reimbursed. So if you are waiting for your child and you're picking them up from school, and you keep the aircon on and the heat seater and music, in an ICE vehicle, sadly, most of them leave them running just for all the kids to breathe in. Whereas an EV, that electricity consumption doesn't get factored in because you're not driving. It's not driving consumption. And so that doesn't factor into this equation, which would tick you down more towards low efficiency. The other things that this doesn't account for is charging losses. So this is saying what the car's received, not what you've pulled from the grid to put into your car. So you lose some efficiencies, perhaps, hopefully not much at all through your wall charger, but through the AC to DC inverter on board in the car is going to lose 5-10% in terms of charging loss. So it doesn't account for idling or preheating your car, which if it was a cold morning and you started up your ICE car early and you left it idling for 5 or 10 minutes, or in Canada, my relatives seem to leave it for longer than that, that petrol you're paying for and you're getting reimbursed for, whereas in an EV you're not getting that reimbursement. So the other things include kind of phantom drain. If if you use overheat protection, if you use Sentry mode, those sorts of things, those chew through the battery that don't go into this consumption. So I think even with my good consumption, if you looked at what I was actually pulling for the grid, from the grid to do so many kilometers, and the only way to know this is to actually have your own meter and meter read how much Ks you're doing and how much electricity you're consuming to do those kilometers. I think, I have a feeling I'd be falling in this, even though I'm a good lifetime efficiency on the car, I'll be around here. And so if you're getting 20 cents there per kilowatt hour electricity prices, then you're probably sitting right around where the ATO is determined, 4.2 cents per kilowatt hour used, per kilometer, per kilometer. Because remember, kilowatt hours and kilowatt hours cancel out, and you're left with cents per kilometer. Explain my algebra. And the ATO have provided a more complicated, unnecessarily more complicated formula for calculating what your what your deduction is. They've made it a bit more complicated than they need to, but that's all right. I'll put that link to the draft ATO determination in the link in below. I'll also put the 12 accounting. So do I think it's the other thing it doesn't account for? So if you have a separate meter and you have to provide electricity to your car, of course the daily supply charge will be included in that bill, which it's not integrated into here at all. And often to get these lower rates at night, you end up paying a higher daily supply charge. So with OVO Energy, for example, I get to 8 cents per kilowatt hour, but then overnight for charging. But then during the day, the tariffs are higher. The daily supply charge is, instead of $1.10, it's $1.35 per day. So those things all add up, and I don't think they're reflected in the 4 cents per kilometer deduction, but hopefully there's been some industry feedback to that draft that will then be reflected in next year's determination. They just, I think, had to bring it out this year and get something going, so there's actually, accountants know what to provide for that rebate. So I think it's a good start. I think it's probably around middle. I think you can do a lot better than 4 cents per kilometer. I think you can do a lot worse. And for those people that live off supercharging, I mean, you can just keep your receipts, and that makes it simple enough. But for those who it's mixed with all your normal home energy consumption, it's a bit more complicated. Now, the only other things, I'll hopefully be getting that OVO Energy kind of review as to why it's working really well for me up soon. Once the rate changes come out for August 1st with SA Power Networks, hopefully I'll have a good reason to put out that video then and defer it until then. Until then, I think that probably covers what I was hoping. So
that side is bigger and that side smaller, and the green thing's pepper.
Great. Don't forget referral links for OVO and Tesla in the link below.